Hi everyone, I'm Jo Fry and this is Jojo Fry Rocks, my YouTube channel, and I wanted to talk about my top 5 guitar heroes. So I put a post up the other day with my top 5 guitar heroes, and I wanted to talk today specifically about Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. I'm sure everybody knows who he is, even if you've never heard Nirvana's music and you've never been interested in them as a band. At one point, he was probably the most famous person on the face of the earth. So even if you're not quite as old as I am, I'm sure you've heard of him. And I wanted to talk today about how he's inspired me over the years, primarily as a guitarist. First and foremost, he was of course a musical genius, in, I would say, the same league as any of the Beatles. In fact, he was a huge fan of the Beatles, which makes complete sense to me. I can completely see and hear that in their songs, in the songs that he's written, and particularly in his melodies. You know, his sense of a pop melody is every bit, you know, his instincts are every bit as good as Paul McCartney's, in my opinion. But anyway, for me specifically, in terms of the guitar, I think sometimes Kurt is very underrated. I think his skills and talents on the guitar are something that people quite often don't appreciate. There's a whole thing about grunge, a whole perception around sort of the 90s Seattle bands and music, that they were somehow you know, not great musicians or not good guitar players, that they're playing, you know, it wasn't on the level of the kind of 80s bands. And I suppose, all right, Kurt Cobain is not Eddie Van Halen, but to me, he's almost better. He's a better songwriter, I would say, and that's based on the kind of guitar riffs and melodies that he wrote. And I would say that, you know, if you think in terms of like what makes a good guitar solo, I think the solo from Smells Like Teen Spirit is perfect. Like, it couldn't be more perfect. And the way it's played is also like, it's completely perfect. It completely serves the song. It enhances the song. It doesn't detract from it. It's completely part of the music, because in essence it's just the melody of the song, but played on one guitar string or two guitar strings. It's so simple, but it works so well within the song. And it's that talent, I suppose, for composition, and particularly the composition of the song on a guitar, that I think is where that sort of inspiration comes from, for me anyway. And just in terms of like the sophistication, I mean, this is something that Rick Beato makes loads and loads of videos about, how sophisticated Kurt's songwriting is. And he made a video, I think just recently, about how the song In Bloom uses all 12 notes. There aren't that many songs, pop songs, hit songs, that use every note that we've got in Western music in one song. It's really impressive. And the fact that he wrote everything on guitar, like, he's not a multi-instrumentalist, you know, he didn't sit down at a piano and compose these. He did everything on guitar. And I remember seeing, you know, I was at that really impressionable age, I suppose, of just starting secondary school, sort of 11, 12, when Nirvana first came out, and when I first saw them on Top of the Pops, when they played Smells Like Teen Spirit, I was blown away. It was literally mind-blowing for me. I had never seen or heard anything like it. And at first, I thought, you know, what is this? What even is this? Like, I don't even know I didn't know what to make of it, but I liked it. I knew that I liked it, and obviously it's really catchy. So it's something that you'll keep repeating over and over in your head, because it gets in there. It's almost kind of hypnotic, and it was just mesmerizing to me. And I think there was something about their look, the whole like chaos of it, that they just didn't seem professional, you know, like the bands that I'd grown up with. I can't probably think of a more polished band in terms of like production and performance than someone like Def Leppard, for example, who I absolutely love. But when you think about their songs, their albums, obviously Mutt Lange produced, you know, all their great albums, and they're sonically perfect, right? There's not a note, there's nothing out of place. It's all just, and it's completely tight and solid and just musically perfect. And their performances would be super well rehearsed. Obviously they've been playing for years and years and years and years through the 80s, you know, and by the time they're in stadiums, they know exactly what they're doing. They've got everything down pat, which makes it an amazing thing to go and see. But in a different way, this was almost kind of shocking to kind of see a band on Top of the Pops that didn't really seem to have their shit together, frankly. And it just, you know, you just didn't know what to make of it. You just almost didn't know what was going to happen next. And that's a really, you know, a really odd thing to see on the BBC. So it was, yeah, but crazy, but in a really exciting way. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that there was something insanely exciting about Nirvana when they came out. And as I started sort of watching more of their videos, listening to more of their music, listening to their albums, it in a way it's deceptively simple, right? It sounds quite simple what Kurt's doing on the guitar, and in some ways it is, but it's genius the way it works, and it made me feel that I could do it. And I think that was a really key thing in my journey as a guitarist, and as a young person, you know, and as a student, someone who was learning an instrument. I'd been playing my acoustic guitar for about 6 years by that point, and I was quite happy, you know, learning all the open chords, bar chords, learning a few riffs here and there, kind of strumming things really, and sort of accompanying myself singing songs on the guitar. But at this point, this made me feel like I wanted to pick up an electric guitar, and I wanted the one that Kurt had, because he just at that point seemed like the coolest person in the known universe. And I really loved the guitar sound. As I listened to, you know, to their albums, I just thought this sounds great. I love the sound of this guitar, and it's something that I think that I could do. So that was when I started asking my parents to get me an electric guitar. And you know, as soon as you Oh, so yeah, as soon as you pick up a guitar and you've got a guitar magazine in front of you with some tab in it for, you know, something like Come As You Are, you can just play it straight away, you know. You've got like basically the whole song, like as soon as you've got that. So it's really simple, but it sounds great straight away. Like you barely have to kind of work at it. I mean, it wasn't the same for everything. I mean, there were some things like I tried to figure some things out myself and just couldn't, because they were actually a lot more complex than I knew. Also, things like that heart-shaped box riff. Like, I didn't know about alternate tunings. I didn't know about drop D. In fact, it's drop D flat because it's tuned down half a step anyway, and then drop D. So I spent so long trying to figure out how to play a heart-shaped box. I just couldn't find it. I couldn't figure it out until I think it was a friend of mine that said, well, it's in drop D. And I was like, what's drop D? And that changed my life as a guitarist, obviously. Like the day you discover drop D, that's a good day. And then, you know, immediately that unlocks a whole other world of things that you can play. That was an amazing discovery. Learning things like alternate tunings, you know, I wouldn't have discovered that had I not been trying to play these Nirvana songs. And of course, you know, I touch on this in the video about my guitar that I made. Kurt was a real inspiration for this because I loved him so much, and I loved the songs, and I loved his guitar. I loved the kind of Jagstang guitar, which I know he actually didn't really play very much, sadly. But I remember at the time there was just such a hype around it. I mean, if you were someone who was like me, who was a bit of a geek and into guitars and in the guitar world, you know, it was big. It was a really big deal, and I just thought it looked so awesome. And again, I thought, well, the guy's a genius. You know, he's so amazing that he's come up with a design for a guitar. How cool is that? That's amazing. At that point, you know, the only other person that I knew that had sort of asked for modifications to a guitar was the Richie Sambora on his signature Strat. So, you know, it just seemed like he could do everything. But particularly, I thought he was an exceptional guitarist. And everything he did seemed so effortless as well. It was like, he was so cool. He didn't even have to try. He could just do all this. He could just play these things, and it was so effortless. You didn't see him sort of really concentrating. It was all kind of like the guitar's really like low down here, and he's just really nonchalant about everything and just sings, and it just seemed to be like it is however it is on the day. You know, he just didn't seem to sweat it. He just didn't seem to stress about, you know, how the gig was going or how the performance was going or anything. Which I guess as a child that was probably quite anxious about lots of things, you know, and getting things right and being a bit of a perfectionist, which I really was as a kid. that was actually something that was quite difficult for me to get over as I grew up and got older, learning to sort of not let perfect be the enemy of good. There are all kinds of issues that come with being a perfectionist, and it can really be quite debilitating in a way. And I could see that I could have gone that way in terms of playing the guitar and learning the guitar, but I really sort of took on board some lessons from sort of Kurt's approach and Kurt's attitude, and the way that, you know, it was just great as it was. And he obviously hadn't spent hours and hours and hours and hours practicing in the way that your sort of 80s shred heroes, obviously. I've heard Steve Vai say in interviews that he would spend like literally kind of 16 to 20 hours a day practicing guitar. So there's no great mystery about, like, well, how is he as good as he is? Because he spent years and years and years in his bedroom for 20 hours a day practicing scales and licks and techniques and inventing his own techniques and all the rest of it. And of course, you know, he's amazing, he's brilliant. But my feeling is that almost anyone could do that. I kind of think that anyone with enough practice really can do anything, but not everyone can be Kurt Cobain.